And we would not like to be together in one community with a country who is in war and represent an imminent danger on us. Because if a member of the European Union is in war, it means that European Union is war, and we don't like it.
In a Brussels meeting room, Europe's leaders rise to applaud a wartime hero, all except one. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stands before the European Council, rallying allies against Russian aggression. But Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán sits stone-faced, arms crossed, refusing to clap. This stark tableau captures a widening rift. On one side, Zelensky, the defiant leader of a nation under siege, pleading for unity. On the other, Orbán, the EU's maverick, openly angry and resistant. Why would a NATO-allied Prime Minister be so at odds with a president fighting for his country's survival? The answer lies in a tangled web of political slights, clashing principles, and raw ambition that has turned these two men into unlikely adversaries. The hostility wasn't always so personal, but it was apparent from the war's earliest days. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, most European leaders rallied behind Zelensky. Orbán did something different. He hedged. While condemning the war in general terms, he refused to let weapons for Ukraine cross Hungarian territory and balked at cutting off Russian energy. Ukraine's president grew visibly frustrated. In a passionate March 2022 address to EU heads of government, Zelensky singled out Orbán by name. "Listen, Viktor," Zelensky implored, referencing Hungary's own tragic history of oppression. He urged Orbán to visit Budapest's Danube Memorial, where shoes honour Jews murdered by fascists in 1944, and see how mass killings were happening again in Ukraine. There are thousands of victims, and you hesitate whether to impose sanctions or not, Zelensky scolded, demanding Orbán choose a side. It was a startling public challenge, effectively accusing the Hungarian leader of moral cowardice in the face of Russian brutality. Orbán's reaction was icy. His spokesman blasted Zelensky's appeals as against Hungary's interests, insisting Hungary would not be pressured into turning off the oil and gas taps that kept Hungarian homes warm. Orbán portrayed Ukraine's pleas as reckless demands that would make Hungarians pay the price for a war not theirs to fight. This disconnect, Zelensky's moral exhortation versus Orbán's hard-nosed nationalism, planted the seeds of a bitter feud. And as the war ground on, the feud only grew more personal. A few weeks later, Orbán scored a landslide victory in Hungary's April 2022 election. In his triumphant speech, the Prime Minister stunned observers by naming Zelensky as one of his enemies. "We had to fight against a huge amount of opponents," Orbán thundered, rattling off adversaries foreign and domestic, the Brussels bureaucrats, the international media, and the Ukrainian president too. It was unheard of. An EU leader branding Ukraine's president, a fellow democratically elected head of state, as an antagonist in a campaign speech. Orbán's message was clear enough. Zelensky's outspoken criticism had hit a nerve. Orbán now casts Zelensky as part of a grand coalition out to undermine him, alongside the EU establishment and liberal elites. Zelensky did not stay silent either. Throughout 2022, as Hungary dragged its feet on supporting Ukraine, Zelensky openly lambasted Orbán's stance. He quipped that Orbán's government was acting like a Russian branch in Europe and begged the EU to stop listening to the excuses of Budapest. In other words, Zelensky suggested Hungary was doing Vladimir Putin's bidding inside the EU. For a proudly sovereign leader like Orbán, this was an insult of the highest order and a direct threat to his narrative at home. By the start of 2023, the animosity was palpable. When Zelensky made a surprise visit to Brussels in February 2023, his first trip out of Ukraine since the invasion, he encountered Orbán face to face. Other EU prime ministers embraced Zelensky as a hero. Orbán offered a limp handshake and little more. In the group photo, protocol placed Orbán just behind Zelensky, a symbolic awkwardness noted by journalists. Orbán's team later posted an image of their handshake that somehow managed to make Zelensky look diminished. The Hungarian PM then tweeted in English to reassert his position. Hungary supports humanitarian aid and calls for an immediate ceasefire. Hungary belongs to the peace camp, he pointedly added. It was a subtweet aimed at Zelensky's war posture. Orbán was effectively saying, "I'm not applauding you, I'm not arming you, I'm the one urging peace while you fight." The clash of optics and rhetoric at that summit crystallized their rift for all of Europe to see. At the heart of Orbán's anger is a profound disagreement over the war itself. Zelensky insists that peace can only come after Russia is defeated or withdraws, that any ceasefire without justice would only freeze the conflict and reward aggression. Orbán, in contrast, has styled himself as the champion of an immediate peace, which, in practice, means pressuring Ukraine to stop fighting, even if it means ceding territory to Russia. He has hammered this message home relentlessly. In speeches, Orbán declares that everyone in the EU and NATO is on the side of the war except us. He paints Hungary as an outlier of principle, resisting a supposedly pro-war Brussels. The Hungarian government even passed an 8-point resolution in early 2023, condemning Russia's aggression but demanding a halt to Western arms supplies and denouncing Brussels' sanctions as failed and dangerous. It's a careful two-step. Formally decry Putin's invasion, yet simultaneously echo Kremlin talking points that arming Ukraine only escalates the war and that sanctions hurt Europe more than Russia. Zelensky and his supporters see Orbán's peace camp stance as disingenuous at best. To them, Orbán's calls for a ceasefire now, while Russian troops occupy chunks of Ukraine, amount to a call for Ukrainian capitulation. Indeed, when Orbán finally made a low-profile visit to